And we're live.
All right.
And
yeah, I think we're actually live. So it's so much different on this side.
Wow, we did it.
Josh is gonna
surprise
be
on our eyes.
He's going to be so proud. All right, so let's get this going. I'm Scott Moon here with Chuck Manley and Ralph Kern for Keystroke Medium. We're going to be doing something completely different today, mostly because Josh is off screwing around in Quantico, learning how to take apart bombs and dismantle clandestine methamphetamine laboratories, which I hear are both really good skills to have. So
everyone needs a hobby, don't they?
Right. Everybody needs to feel important is the way I like to look at it. So there's a lot of drama before we got started. All my fault. I about crashed. I did literally almost crash the internet with all that joking. So we're gonna talk about writing and some questions. Ask us anything. But before we do that, let's just get warmed up here a little bit. Chuck, you got anything you want to talk about? Kind of things you're doing with writing, or anything you want to get out of this show before we get too far into it?
No, I mean, there's a lot of really good questions here. My writing routine is pretty standard right now. I'm taking a break from my space opera thing, and I'm doing an urban fantasy thing set right here in Huntsville, my hometown. So just for fun. But no, I think we got a lot of good questions, and I'm hoping folks can get some use out of this for sure. And plus, Ralph got to make it, so that's
Ralph's been working all night too. So how you doing? Yeah. You awake yet?
Yeah, I'm good. It's as I was just saying to the guys before we came, I just woke up after night, and I'm not sort of the most sociable when I woke up, and I realised first time I was speaking to them about 5 minutes ago. It was the first time I've actually spoken, so you're gonna have to bear with me. The voice is gonna get warmed up slowly. How now, brown cow, all that kind of thing. Get it going and get the voice lubricated. Yeah, writing wise, it's been good. Last week I got my book 3 of the Locust series wrapped up and across to the publisher, which was great. So Audible Studios have got that now, and hopefully Michael Kramer is working on it as we speak. What else? I've been working hard on that project as well, the Great War one that we mentioned in the Jamie Glover interview.
That's so exciting.
About 35,000 words into that now, and it's great to see it actually start to take shape, and the awesome visuals and artwork that he's come out with. And I think Jamie and I came to a bit of a conclusion on that one, that rather than sort of me directing the art, sort of like, this is what I want, Jamie, and then I'll back describe that into the book. So it's quite.
That's actually a good idea.
Yeah. So I quite, that's working really well, and it's great to sort of describe some of these things, and then know that you've got that sort of backing in terms of visual medium to sort of kind of direct people to. Obviously, how that's seamlessly done will come later, whether it's a series guide or whether it's a
I like that a lot.
Technical manual is what we were talking about, which we really like the idea of, something like that. So so James has been doing that fantastic hard work while I've been sort of slacking off on the side. So it's great to be sort of doing my part on it now.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. I like working with artists because I get inspired visually. I think a lot.
Yeah. Every time he comes out with something new, it's like must do another like 500,000 words.
Exactly.
So that's great to do. What else on the writing front? I mean, other than that, it's mostly been unfortunately real world work and whatnot. But
you've had a busy time of it. I know we've talked quite a bit offline. And I had a day that I wouldn't really talk about on here because most people wouldn't be interested in it. But I had one of those days yesterday. I was like, I am so glad that we're done with this. I'm ready to get back to my writing people.
Yeah.
Speaking of Scott,
I haven't lost my good looks, unfortunately.
There, buddy.
Do what?
Sorry.
It says, Scott, I understand you broke that top 100
I did.
Sci-fi thing, man. Nice job.
I did. Yeah. And it's just funny because I saw Josh do it when golf clap for Scott. I saw Josh do it with the Terra Nova books, and I was like, I hope I can do that. And then of course Craig Martelle and Richard Fox, they're responsible for that. But it's nice. And it is really neat. It's kind of weird though, because you always look at that list, or I've looked at that list before, and then you're like, "That's weird. Who's that guy there? That's me. Cool." So
I think what was really nice was seeing your name and then right above Andy Weir.
I know.
Andy Weir's a lovely, lovely bloke. Yeah, there's no doubt.
That only happened. That only happened because we haven't had him on the show yet. So if we had him on the show, he would obviously be much higher in the top 100.
So you're kind of sabotaging Andy Weir.
I'm holding him back. Correct. He's been saying, I want to be on your show. I'd like to come talk to you guys about writing my books. And I said, Andy, you're just going to have to wait, okay, until it's time, until it's your time. You're not ready for the big time yet. That's a conversation that we've had in my head several times. So I've actually heard Andy Weir's an extremely nice guy. And I've never obviously met him.
I've heard him on interviews. He comes across that way for sure.
Yeah. He did one piece. I did that. Ralph Kern puts the world to writers. Play on puts the world to rights, and it was a question series on the sci-fi authors who like have a realistic sort of element to their books and sort of a little bit about the research, which features into a question we've got later. And I came out with about 5 or 6 questions on his new, back then it hadn't been titled, but what turned out to be Artemis, and sent them across to him. And I kid you not, I probably sent them across at, say, about, for argument's sake, like 10 o'clock in the morning. And at 10 past 10, and there was like a 3,000 word response. I was like, yeah. You're thinking, am I getting the exclusive stuff? And you're like looking around, and you go, no, I can't see anything that's the same. So he is a really fast worker as well, and so friendly and lovely. Yeah. I'll dig out the link for people and can have a look at it. But yeah, lovely.
Yeah, we should do that.
So what else have you been up to, Scott?
Well, I don't know. Just see. Let's watch some exciting stuff that's going on here. Mostly it's just work. I had the day that I think Richard and Craig both posted that link about the top 100. That was on literally my 21-year anniversary at work.
Wow.
My son was born the day before I started the police academy back 100,000 years ago. And, or
21.
Or 21, who's counting? Who's counting? And then the next day I started the academy. And so I always remember the date because I'm not good with dates, but I remember that one pretty good. And so that was kind of neat, kind of special. When you start the police academy here, the first week you spend the entire week and you read the policy and procedure manual aloud to the rest of the class. And it takes an entire week, and you basically read for 8 hours a day, and it's just as boring as you think. So now imagine you're a first-time father that's had like literally 1 hour of sleep a night, and you're trying to sit there in class and not die and fall asleep while you're reading the most boring stuff. Because it starts off with things like the duties of the badge on the floor, clerk at the city, and start where they sit. You're like, wow, this is exciting stuff. Anyway, so we should
ready to dive in here.
Yeah, let's get some questions going. And I think we're going to run out of talk, because once we be pretty chatty on these. So great questions. We got Ken McClellan here in the chat box. Do we want to start with that and then jump over to our list of pre-done questions? And then
why don't we hit the ones that were on the Facebook group first? And hold on a second. Let me read Ken's question.
But I'll real quick, because otherwise
let's do that. Let's do that one real quick.
So Ken McClellan asks, and if people in the chat do not want your name used when we read these questions, then please let us know. Otherwise, I like to read them kind of as a shout out to all of our guests. So Ken says, here's a question. I know, Scott, you read a lot. How do you find time to read while working a full-time job and still have time to write? So we're going to probably talk about this in a couple of different ways as we go through as far as time management stuff. But for me, I've always been a huge audiobook listener since I was a kid. Growing up in Kansas in the Midwest, you have to drive like 5 hours to go any place. And so we would either listen to audiobooks back when you had cassette tapes, or we would read books to each other. So I became a fan early on. I listened to them all the time. And then I bought some books. There's one called Rapid Reading, and I'm still a very slow reader, but I tried to improve my reading speed and comprehension. I used to practice 30 minutes a day, and I had it on a spreadsheet, 30 minutes a day of improving the quality of my reading, because I knew it was important, just because I wanted to read more. One, because I had too many books, and two, it's good for a writer to be able to, through his manuscript, his or her manuscript enough, and get that work done, because it can be very time consuming if you read slow like I do. What about you guys? You guys got some reading time tips?
Well, my view is that reading as an author is vitally important for one of two reasons. One is a bit of kind of a break from your own work, and two, it's well, it's three reasons really. Two, it's enjoyable. You know, we're asking people to enjoy enjoy a hobby, so to speak, that we've got a stake in as well. So, you know, if you're not a reader, you know, it might be more challenging to be a writer. But three, it's also important for market research as well in many ways. So Chris Fox, especially, he talks a lot about the right to market and things like that. How do you know what the market is? Or you can assume you know what the market is, but you to see a really popular book, you know, got to get every advantage you can and see what and how they're doing things to make yourself better as a writer. In terms of managing that reading time, like you guys, with a full-time job, own writing, and you know, sort of a partner as well, and whatnot, it can be tricky to fit it in. That being said, you know, it's also important to make time for it. Personally, I tend to have a book on my phone, and then you know, when opportunity allows, whether I'm on a commute or just late at night, I'll tuck up in bed and I'll be having sort of half an hour or something before going to sleep or whatnot. Also, as I'm sure you guys find as well, you get a lot of as your tribe grows, you find that a lot of sort of the writers that once may have been a step removed, who may have been, inverted commas, just writers to you, and now friends. And you find yourself on their sort of beta lists and things like that. So
you got to read your friends' stuff for sure.
Yeah, which is nice, because you're going to get a sneak preview of a lot of stuff, and you know, you get to see stuff before it comes out, and dare I say it without sounding arrogant, sometimes it's nice to sort of like see one of your like comments or whatever being action to a certain degree. So yeah, there's, I'll say my reading is sort of 50-50 between sort of stuff that I may have happened across somehow, and just think, oh, I want to have a look at that, and 50% data stuff, which is, you know,
part of the tribe. We call it tribal reading. Reading in your tribe.
Reading in your tribe, yeah.
Reading in your writing tribe. I have one quick thing on that, and then Chuck, I know you probably could talk about that too, but do you want to, like, each of us take a question, and we can maybe expand upon it, get through all the questions, then we can circle back around and get into more detail?
Honestly, I don't have a lot to add to the reading thing. I'm like you. I do audiobooks mostly because I have a hard time reading while I'm working on a book, and I seem to always be working on a book. So
the one thing I learned for beta reading that has really helped me is if somebody sends me something, especially if they send it to me in a PDF format, my phone will play that back to me, that at Read Aloud app. And so if somebody sends me something, they're like, if you send me yourself, Chuck, like in a PDF, then I will just listen to it on the way to work, and that gives me an extra hour of data.
Yeah. I think audio is a great way to get your stuff in like that. All right, you want to dive into these Facebook questions?
You want to start at the top?
I think we start at the top and work our way down. And I tell you what, if there's any we don't get to in this thing, I'll do a Facebook Live after the show to get to the rest of them. Does that sound good?
That sounds like a great plan. Roger.
All right, then. Terrye Tombs wants to know, what are our best tips for getting out of a writing slump? And Josh Hayes also asked, he wanted us to talk about what we do when we're not feeling it and we don't really want to get behind the keyboard. So, Scott, you want to dive in on that?
Yeah, and I looked at some of these. I made a couple of notes. Most people are probably like this, but getting out of a writing slump, and I have definitely been there. Let's just put it that way. I know a lot of people see all the stuff I'm doing, and it looks like I'm super productive, but I definitely get there where you're not feeling it. So there's two things. One, have a set schedule and break it down and make it try to be concise. One, first thing in the day, if you at all possibly can, because the things you do first is what's going to get done. If you do it later, it may not get done. So if you can arrange your schedule so you do it first, whether you get up early or not, it doesn't matter. Do it first. Do it the same time every day. Have like a set minimum time, and just get in there and slog away at it if you're not feeling it. Because for me, for writing and for working out both, usually the times I don't feel like starting, I usually have the best session, whether it's writing or working out or almost anything, is after you kind of get warmed up, you'd be surprised how good you'll be.
You're a little stuttery there on the screen, Scott.
Am I talking too fast?
No, I think it's your connection, man.
I'm sure my connection sounds.
Yeah.
In terms of me with writing slumps, I think there's no single writing slump. You know, there can be many reasons that you will have a writing slump. I think the several sort of key reasons would be: one, raw tiredness. You know, you've got a lot of other stuff on at the moment, and you know, the thought of like laying down 1,000 words is like, oh. That, and without sort of you know, devaluing it, is something really you've got to just power through, and either do it or don't, and hold yourself to account if you don't. And sometimes you need a break, and don't forget that, and don't devalue it. Other times, frankly, folks, you just well, frankly, Ralph, you're just being lazy and just knuckle down and do it. A second reason, which, and probably a more sort of serious one, is you might have reached a point in your book or your manuscripts where you're struggling to get from A to B. So if you work like I do, you have like for a novel, you'll have 20 or so set scenes, and I'll have them planned quite well. But I'm also comfortable with pantsing between some of those scenes as well, and seeing how you get it. And sometimes it's sort of like you're kind of thrown off trajectory a little bit, and you're like, well, I know I need to get from here to here. I'm just struggling a little bit to figure out how. Personally, one of the things I like to do then is I'll go out for a run, or I'll go for a workout or something like that, and I'll let that scene I'll let that process in my head, and quite often, the answer will just present itself. It will just come out of nowhere. And I think, oh, that would be a really good idea on how to do that or fix that. So, in terms of that, I think one should remember as a professional author that you're not just working when you're tapping away at the keys. Yeah, it is or can be a full-time job, and you are working as well when you are doing other stuff, and your subconscious is working through something. It is tricky to recognise that as well, but once you do recognise that, it's important to harness that. And then often I find the combination of coming back, having gone for a run, done a workout, testosterone's high or and whatnot, and bang, I don't just do the 1,000 words. I power through and do a lot more than I kind of self-scheduled into doing. So that's my humble opinion on those things. How about you, Hank?
Hank's here? Hank's here? Where's Hank?
Sorry.
I called you Hank last time too. We may have to change your name to Hank.
Yeah. Just
it's your voice. That's what's got it. It's your voice.
Well, I'll tell you, Ralph. No. All right. So here's the way I see it, and I'll try to be quick. Writing slumps come in two flavors in my experience. One is what I call the daily slump, and that's what Scott's talking about, where you sit down and you just can't get going. In those situations, I do one of two things, and this is what I recommend. I either do like Ralph says, and I go for a walk and kind of let my subconscious chew on it while I'm focused on something else, or I just suck it up and write anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the project that I'm working on, but just something to get those mental gears spinning and get those words going. Because if you're deep into a project, you're eventually going to come back to that if it's been, if it's predominantly on your mind and whatnot. So my suggestion is for those daily ones is just sit your butt down and start free writing. Just write, okay, I need to write today. If that goes through your head, put it on the page. What do I need to write today? Put it on the page and just start those words going. And then eventually those floodgates will open and it'll work. Louis L'Amour said it best. He said, just sit down and start writing. Once you turn on the faucet, the water will come.
Yep.
So that's it. Now for writing
flavor two. That was the chocolate flavor. So what's the vanilla flavor? You said there's two flavors.
Course.
Oh yeah. Now
here,
the second one is the slump that comes between books or stories, between the big projects.
Yeah.
That one, I think the best thing you can do is explore. Go out, read, take a class, go for a hike in some place you've never been before. Find something new. Find something to spark your imagination, to trigger something in your brain that will give you those stories ideas. Don't sit at your keyboard and just stare at it like, inspire me and wait for the muse to come and knock on the door. I don't think that works. You got to get out and live. All the stories are out there. You go find them, you add your imagination, you'll come up with something that inspires you enough to get back to the keyboard and start writing. And that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, and that features into the first question as well, how important reading is
exactly.
Okay.
Let's go on with the next question. Kalene Williams asks, how do you deal with or cope with the after publishing blues?
I'm kind of cynical on that one. So Kalene, I'm going to be blunt. I hope I don't upset you, but don't do this. I never write anything expecting anybody else in the world to care, because 99.9% of them won't. In my experience, your family wants you to be happy and they love you and all that stuff. But when it comes to writing, that is really a very solitary thing. And what other people's attention, when that matters, is when you go from writing to selling. You want lots of attention when you're trying to sell your book, but I'm telling you right now, do not put the only approval you should be worried about after you've written a book is what you get out of the mirror.
Yeah,
because
I have something good to add to that, Chuck.
Go right ahead.
Because like what you're talking about, for example, my wife does not read my books. She read the first couple and she doesn't. And she was very insightful. And she said that puts a lot of stress on our relationship. Some people have a great, they're like their wife is, or their wife or husband or whatever is their first best beta reader. But in our case, it just put a lot of pressure because, what if she doesn't like it and she gives me her honest opinion, then I'm mad. You know how sensitive we can be about her writing. So I do the same thing. I don't look for that type of excitement close to home. And I don't really even promote my books that much, like at work or amongst my friends, because most of them are not readers anyway, to be honest. So, but also on that, how to get through the slump is basically just get started on a new project and get excited about it. I mean, if you want something proactive to do, that's what I would do.
Shiny.
Yeah, look, squirrel. Squirrels always make everything better, in my opinion.
That's right. They're fun.
Yeah, just on the same question. I'm really lucky. My girlfriend is one of my first beta readers on any project, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I inflict my stuff on it, and she certainly says the right things, and in terms of both being supportive and being constructive in her criticism. So that's really useful. But like Scott, I don't promote at work, and it was only very recently that I didn't come out, but I got outed at work, which
I came out
which was
a different podcast we do.
Yeah, yeah. I've got the dress in the cover, which one in itself was sort of quite nice, and sort of like people at work have kind of somehow, somewhere discovered you in that big wide world, which was nice, but yeah, I don't really sort of promote it work. And now sort of I get generally curiosity on that front, but still I keep things very, very much segregated in terms of that. But yeah, in terms of the sort of the blues after publishing, yeah, I do get that to a certain extent, but also like Chuck, it's sort of like the next, I'm looking across at the next squirrel and the next shiny thing as well, and probably towards the end of the book as well, towards sort of like the final editing cycles, etc. My brain's already sort of starting to process on what's happening next, but also also you've got to kind of keep that enthusiasm going because your first few days and weeks after a book is released is going to be when your key marketing time is, when you've really got to get it out there, and where it's going to be making or breaking. So you may have a slump that you have got to sort of battle through. And again, I'm sorry with how sort of callous and unsympathetic it might sound, but it's important that you keep that enthusiasm going for your book. And if you need to, just go back and read it and enjoy it as a reader as well. And have the reader experience of your work, and then try and transmit that enthusiasm to people as well. But yeah, I do fully understand as well that sort of your baby's out there, your baby's grown up, and it's in the wild. It's out there earning a living, and it's something you've spent probably the best part of months or years on. Is like. Now you don't need to nurture every day and do 1,000 words every day, or you're slaving over a sentence thinking
you can
what punctuation needs to be where, and or linking in with your editor, but
you're really invested in it. So and we'll move on to the next question. But I do understand something. I think we all understand what Kalene's talking about. Is we're all creative people, so. Who has ever sat there and like daydreamed the best case scenario for your book? Like, I'm going to launch this book tomorrow. I'm going to wake up and the world is going to be different. There are going to be people line up beside my house wanting to give me praise and adulation. And then you wake up and it's like, I sold 2 books. Really? Come on, man. Where are you people? I thought you're all going to buy like millions of copies of this book and everything was going to be different. So, but yeah, it's as creative people that are in tune with our emotions, because you have to be to write. This is a pitfall, and that's why it is one of the things that makes it hard to write. Is you open yourself up. My big thing right now is I have some scenes in some of my books where I'm like, God, if people read that, they're going to think I'm a horrible person.
I don't think so, though. I mean,
you might be right.
Yeah, let's
go on. Let's go to the next question.
Let's proceed.
Are we halfway through?
Are we there? Ready for an ad read?
We are ready for an ad read, Scott.
Oh my God, this is so stressful. I don't know how Josh does this stuff.
He's a superhero.
Okay, yeah, he is literally blowing stuff up right now. Actually, I meant earlier I was going to say, hey, look, we have a special guest in the live chat.
Yes, we do.
Because Josh is chatting in the live chat and he's not on the show because
he's unusual.
Because he's in Quantico doing like super cool stuff.
He's blowing up meth labs.
Do you reckon he's sort of like there with a pair of wire clippers in one hand and his phone? I know it's ticking down, but
yeah, blue wire, Josh, blue wire. Got the blue wire.
Who's our sponsor this week, Scott?
Let's sponsor. Let's see. Let's go with Rhett C. Bruno, an awesome guy, very, very generous with other authors and a good part of our community. But he is releasing the complete circuit trilogy. It's an omnibus edition. He's making kind of a full court press, trying to get this out there so people can see it. So I would really hope everybody can spread the word on this one. I'm going to read the description here. The complete circuit trilogy omnibus edition by Rhett C. Bruno. It says, Earth is a dying planet. To save humanity, to survive, humanity founds the circuit, a string of colonies across the solar system dedicated to mining resources vital to preserving what remains of mankind. The new Earth Tribunal, a powerful religious faction rises to rule the circuit. They believe a spirit within Earth will one day appear and welcome humanity back home. But following a string of seemingly random attacks, the tribunal suspects its mortal enemy, the Ceres, that's good.
That's just his connection, folks.
The
He said it perfect.
Ceresian Pact, I believe.
The Ceresians. The Ceresians have again rallied to the challenge of their absolute rule, but instead, they soon realize a new sinister threat has arisen and plans to bring down the tribunal once and for all. Join an unlikely band of would-be survivors, the tribunal's best spy, a roguish Caesarean mercenary, a subservient android, and a disgraced general, as they are drawn into a conspiracy destined to change the circuit forever. So this is basically something that would be real good for, if you like The Expanse, you got to check this out.
As it happens, I am 44% of the way through the trilogy. I've got it as a box set, so I'll finish book one, and sort of powering through book two. Man, it is a good series. I'm just I'm still blown away by the finale of the book one, and Rhett has this brilliant ability to it's something like Peter Caldron has, paint pictures with words.
Right.
And the finale of book one, I could see it in my mind, blaring away. We've got like this quite sort of cataclysmic sort of battle going on, and I could visualize it perfectly. So that was a massive, strong recommend. I'm still reading through it. I'm like, yeah, very fresh.
It's really good, and this is also available on Nook and Kobo and iTunes and all those things, all those places. So you don't have to just read this one on Amazon like a lot of stuff that we do. So, all right, so let's do something fabulous right now. No pressure.
No pressure. Let's see. I think we got one from Jamie Glover here.
Woo.
Jamie Glover. Who's that guy?
Yeah. No.
Oh, don't get me started.
As an artist, I often look back at work I've done in the past and think, gee, I could do so much better nowadays. Do you find the same is true with writing? As writers yourselves, do you find it makes you more perceptive of progression improvement in the writing of your peers and colleagues? Yes, and not really. I mean, I've got.
Well, you've been decisive in your comment.
That's right. No, I saw this one in the Facebook group, and I almost posted a picture of my closet novels, because about 10 feet away from me in my closet in my office here, I've got just an enormous stack of novel boxes and a big plastic bin full of short stories and essays and about a million other things. And, every once in a while, I'll go back and read some of that older stuff just to sort of see how far I've come. So I'm definitely more aware of it in myself. But I don't necessarily know that makes me notice big differences in other writers' work unless they take a just extreme shift in one direction or the other. So that's what I got for that one.
I think for myself, I think because your writing journey in terms of your career is one that's spread over years, months and years. Your evolution might not be overly visible to yourself until you maybe look back like 2 or more books ago. And I definitely see a difference in writing now as opposed to writing in my first one. I think it has without sounding big-headed, it probably has a little bit more confidence now. In terms of knowing what information is perhaps superfluous and what information is key, and being able to throttle myself better in terms of when you've got those kind of scenes where you can take your time, sort of explain, nice bits of exposition, and to fit in with the showing, stuff like that. So knowing when you can do those things, which you might not be able to know at when you start out, and then sort of when you get to an action scene or whatever, sort of being able to throttle yourself better and know how to sort of ride that wave in terms of getting things across quick and fast. but yeah, I think because your evolution is quite slow, you don't necessarily see it yourself. That being said, it's probably important to have that sort of self-identification.
On how much. Yeah, and it depends on how much you go back and look at your work, because with like writing, it's such a huge thing. So you remember this novel you wrote 10 years ago, and you're like, but then you go reading, like, that's not how I remembered it with me. And I also know, along with what Jamie Glover is saying there, is that if I go back and open up a book I wrote 10, 15, 20 years ago that I think is done, I will start tinkering with it. So I think probably he's right, but just, was it there's a famous painter, Picasso or Leonardo da Vinci, or somebody who used to work on his paintings like years and years after they were done. He'd do little changes to them.
And you can see people do that. They do re-releases and things like that. That might be something that I'd like to do. I don't think sort of talking to Jamie a bit, sort of off show about our project. I certainly know things. There are things that might bring a seismic shift to an artist. So a new piece of software or new various. Forgive me, I don't know. It's very technical sometimes. Something. Yeah, a new piece of software is the best example, which might suddenly bring quite a seismic shift in what the art looks like in terms of evolution. I don't think as a writer you can necessarily have that. I suppose possibly. I did one book in first person, so that might be sort of roughly analogous, but it can perhaps be less visually obvious that you've kind of evolved, but evolution is important in your writing career as well.
You should always be trying to get better.
Yeah.
You should always be improving in some way, even if it's small things and whatnot. So. I'm scrolling down. We have so many questions that are so awesome here. So
we've got Jacob Cooper and Logan Scott. Perhaps that question could be rolled into sort of one.
I also need to thank Lauren, who is taking show notes for us, because she's awesome and like 100 times better at it than we are. So that's awesome. So which one are we going to do? What was that? You're going to roll Jacob's question with somebody else?
Jacob's and Logan's kind of go hand in hand. I'm just going to read Logan's, and I think we'll answer both of them by doing that.
That'll work.
Do you find it more difficult to write a short story once you have gone on to write novels? Is it harder to write more directly to keep your story short once you have gotten used to having the word count you need to tell your story with the description you think is necessary? And how much do you think it is okay to leave the reader to interpret? And what role can short stories, spin-off, or direct storyline play in a series? So, Scott, I'm going to pitch this one to you, man, because I don't write a lot of short stories, and so I can't speak to this because I have a really, really hard time working short. So I guess my answer is, yeah, I find it really difficult to write short after I work long, because I don't.
Yeah, like as impossible, completely impossible. Yeah. So the last year or so, Ralph and I and Josh and a lot of us here have had some really good experiences with short stories, because we had people like Nathan Heisted, Craig Martelle, and just lots of people have brought us into their short story world. And that's actually how I kind of was introed, got my street creds with Craig, and then started working with him. So here's what I did when I started writing this. One of the stories, this is a funny story. So we wrote with Chris Kennedy for a few credits more, and Josh and I decided we're going to write the stories. We're going to write separate stories that interlink, right? And we were very excited. And so I outlined it because I knew this is going to be, plot's going to be more important. I can't just pants it. So I plotted it out, and I did this on several other short stories, is I would plot them out. But then if I wrote those, they would basically, I would plot a short story, but really I plotted a novel. And so all my short stories were like 10 times longer than they needed to. Then I had to go back and just chop everything down and make it make sense. So that's good. As to what to do with short stories, obviously you can do a lot of things with them. Use them as reader magnets, give them away to your most loyal readers, make them your newsletter subscriber exclusives. Short stories are good for that. They're good just to, not even to publish, just to get a feeling for your characters and stuff, and maybe they work in someplace. So I may have gotten lost in the weeds on your question there. So, but yeah, I find short stories harder to write. You have to be much more concise. They usually have word counts. You have to get them in under. And the funny part about the Chris Kennedy one is that I saw him on Facebook lambasting like 3 other writers for their super long stories because they were like 11,000 words long. And he was just giving them, just hanging trash on them, like, you guys, I told you guys 8,000 words. Why are these so long? And the whole time I'm just like chewing my fingernails going, did he read my story yet? Because it was like almost 13,000 words long. Like 11th hour right before they hit publish. I'll get the book here and show you how huge it is because how long everybody's short stories were. Then he finally realized, he's like, and you too, Mr. Moon, what are you doing? That thing is huge. Hold on a second. So here's how thick that anthology turned out to
Holy
be.
crap.
Oh, wow.
It's 600 pages.
That's like Warhammer length, that is.
I know, it's massive.
It's
and
a
like,
murder weapon, man.
most of the short stories in this anthology are like 10,000, 12,000 words long. And, to be honest, my short story in this book is one of the favorite things I've ever written. I really like it a lot. So, anyway, so that's my 2 cents on short stories.
Yeah, for me, short stories are, when I write a novel, I'll always write a framework first, and then I'll slowly kind of put meat on the bones. I'll fill it up. So some people write big, like almost like a kind of just lay down words, and it might be twice as long or more than what the finished product is eventually going to be, and then they'll par it all the way down. I go the opposite way, so I'll be sort of like half long, and I'll sort of like blaze my path, and then sort of put more meat on the bones, and as I go. Actually, on short stories, I then do the reverse. I kind of go high and then whittle it back down again. Short stories are excellent as sort of learning tools as well. It probably touches a little bit on Jamie's question as well. You can try new things in short stories, which might be a little bit less risky than a full novel. You can test the market a little bit. So I certainly know in one of Nathan Heisted's explorations ones, I did a real kind of pew space opera thing, whereas before I'd kind of been a bit more sort of hard science fiction about things, and I got some like really good feedback on that. And it's like, oh, maybe I'm not awful at pew, and that gave me the confidence to sort of, especially looking at the Great War series I've got coming up, which is obviously for obvious reasons got a lot more action in it. It's given me a nice bit of confidence in those kind of scenes, that kind of pacing and whatnot. So yeah, again, like Scott, I think I possibly got lost in the weeds a little bit here, but yeah, it can be harder to keep your story short normally, and hopefully there's no anthologists listening now. When someone gives a word count, there is a sort of perhaps a grey area there where you can kind of sneak over a little bit, especially if you've got a good relationship with the anthologist as well. It shouldn't be something that you kind of take as gospel or whatever, but
cash payments under the table.
Yeah, but if it's a good story and it's 9,000 instead of 8,000 words, and the anthologist turns around and says, no, then yeah, that's a brave decision by the anthologist, arguably. So, but make sure you foster that relationship, have those conversations early. If it starts to sneak over, then normally they'll go, okay, whatever.
The problem is that your anthologist who's putting the anthology together, they have to pay to have all that edited. So if you have 18 authors that all go 4,000 words over, and now all of a sudden they've doubled their production outlay, and that can be a downer. On the upside, they now have this massive book. If they're in KU, maybe they can get more page reads. I don't know.
Yeah. There's swings and roundabouts, isn't there, on that front for people. So yeah, I'm just looking at the question to see whether we've.
All right. Well, let's go to the next one now. Guy Anthony DeMarco wants to know: is it acceptable to start a novel with a gerund in the same sentence as a split infinitive using an unreliable narrator through second-person POV? Now, I personally feel that this specific construction is a genre convention of dinosaur, Bigfoot, or tentacle erotica, or any mashup thereof. So, Guy, if you're doing it within the confines of those genres, I think you're good, man. Go for it.
I missed that question. I thought the answer was 42, and so I didn't have that one at all. I wish that we had Lauren or Ellen on here with us to tell us. I mean, Lauren's in the chat. She can tell me explain what a gerund is again, because I keep forgetting. I'm terrible at grammar. My grammar's so bad. Thank God for spell check.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, the best example of a gerund,
squiggly line, and
the best thing, if I'm remembering correctly, the best example of a gerund is like to boldly go where no one has gone before. That boldly is the gerund because it's between the two and the go.
Oh, there you go. See, Chuck is now the smartest person on Keystroke Medium.
No, Thank you. I looked it up before the show.
All right.
Terry says to Guy, she says the answer to that question is no. So, she gets points for brevity.
Like your 1-star review. Nope.
That's my review right there. But yeah, Terry's clearly read. What is it?
The
Strunk and White's Strunk and White's manual of style. It says rule number 17 is omit needless words, which would probably make our podcast a lot shorter if we did that.
5 minutes learning nugget.
We handled Josh's question about when we talked about how to write if you don't feel like it. The basic answer is do it anyway, at least for a little bit, and then see if it catches on. And if not, don't be so hard on yourself. Jonathan Yanez has a question. He says, how do you guys keep track of all the details in your worlds? 3 and 4 book plus books in a series. So I have an answer to that, but I would love to hear you guys go first so I can wait.
Well, I'd say we're probably lucky that Josh isn't here, because this would be the perfect place for a half-hour monologue on Scrivener, wouldn't it?
I can take his place on that. I'm perfectly capable.
Yep.
Fire away then. Fire away.
Yeah, Scrivener. That's how I do it. Every one of my books, as I'm world building and stuff, I have a file for the character. I have a people, a places, and a things file, and everything I've done research on, every character goes in whichever file it pertains to. And then let's say I tend to write in trilogies. So if I'm ready to start writing book 2, I just copy those files directly into the second Scrivener file for book 2. And I immediately have access to all my character data, all my world data, all my device and stuff, all the trappings of the book. So it's right there. So, once again, Scrivener is the shit. I don't care what anyone else says. It's the best. So
Scrivener is a great tool, and you don't have to overthink it and make it too complicated. But it's just so nice. One of the simplest things about Scrivener I like for this purpose is that you can have, like when I did on Word, I'd have to open a file and close a file and stuff. But in Scrivener, you can have 2 of them together.
Right.
And like what I like to do is put the entire series in one Scrivener project. And then like it's really good for names. So I go to the top of book 1 and I'll search for Yanez, because I'm registering Jonathan in one of my stories right now. I hope that he doesn't mind. And I can figure out, and I know exactly where he's at, or if I changed his rank or title or hair color or whatever throughout the whole series. So good tools there.
You say, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm saying, and it depends on if you're a good planner like Josh or some of the other guys here. I think that makes it easier to keep track of those details. I'm not very organized, so.
I do it the old-fashioned way. I've got a Word document that I associate with the series, and I'll keep that. I'll keep that sort of updated and whatnot. I'll even do things like copy and paste sort of. So in sort of one of my series is the Locust. I sort of cast my characters as well. So like pictures of the actors, and so I've kind of got something visual to refer to, and I've got the pictures copy and pasted in there, and I'll basically do a pseudo Scrivener in a Word document. The to sort of expand a little bit further on the story. So the Great War series I'm writing now, that'll, I plan to do a boom 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 release on that one. So I'm actually writing it all in one before it will get released, and then it will get released on say a month by month, and that way it's actually a little bit easier. So whilst I haven't got to book 3, for argument's sake, let's say I get to book 3 and I realise, crap, I need to retcon something in book 1 to make something in book 3 work. I'll actually be able to go back and do that before it even sees the light of day. And I'm quite looking forward to that, because sometimes you can kind of be like, you can do something in like book 1 and you think, I wish I hadn't blown that up, or perhaps kind of needed that, which is actually quite good in many ways, because it kind of puts you in the situation that like your characters will be in. It's like, our lives will be a hell of a lot easier if we still had our MacGuffin. We lost in book 1. Now we've got to kind of figure it out and make do without it.
If we hadn't wrecked that ship, then we'd have a lot easier time getting back to base here.
Exactly. We wouldn't have to row.
Or what's the Princess Bride? Everybody needs a Princess Bride quote. It says, "Why didn't you list that amongst our resources in the first place?" They get up there and they're like, "If we only had a death cloak and a wheelbarrow." I have a death cloak and a wheelbarrow. Okay, so let's go on to. Do we want to take a couple easy ones, or we want to get to Bill Frisbee's question? Could be short or long answered. And we got
honestly, like I said, I'm willing to do a little Facebook thing after this to get to all of them. So if you want to just pick and choose or go down the list, whichever way you want to go.
I'll bang off 2 real quick, and then we'll come back. So for Craig Martelle, who is your favorite author conference director, and when will he get his black stroker shirt? Well, obviously Craig Martelle, and as soon as possible. And
ask Josh.
Yeah, no, we will do that for sure. And then I want to get, I think Clifton Slater's is a good question, but first I'm going to answer Ellen Campbell. What does Scott have against contractions in dialogue? This is a horrible lie that's been put against me. I'd like to just debunk that right now. I love to use contractions in dialogue.
I seem to recall that you used one with pride about a year ago.
I use some contraction. That's me. No, but I will occasionally do it where I don't use them because I'm trying to make one character sound different than another. I had some beta readers one time that we were confused because I thought they were telling me not to use the contractions, but they were actually telling me to use more of them or something, and we eventually worked it out. But yeah, I think contractions are really good. My first professional editor I ever had wanted me to use contractions every place. And I actually like that better when I read or write, but I know rules of grammar basically say outside of dialogue, you should be a little more careful with contractions. So,
I think that's a great point, because I certainly know when you've got multiple POVs and you've probably got someone like a little bit more casual or something like that, then using contractions outside of narrative in their sections can help keep the reader in that mindset. That they're a little bit more casual, a little bit more, free and easy. Whereas perhaps if you've got someone a bit more business-like and whatnot, not using contractions in the main outside of dialogue, even though that character may well use contractions within their own narrative, can again help sort of subtly influence the reader on that front and help sort of solidify that character.
Take it another way, Ralph. You can probably answer this. What about like jargon and stuff, either for like law enforcement, military jargon, or like scientific jargon? That's another thing too. In my urban fantasy, I use lots of cop jargon, but I do not explain any of it. And some people hate that, but some people are okay with it. Because you kind of eventually, if you read after a while, you kind of figure out what they're talking about. But I don't explain any of the jargon. They just use it like they would use it.
I think that's something that's easily overdone, though.
Right.
It can be easily overdone.
And most of the jargon I'm talking about is in radio traffic. So they're doing a specific thing on the radio, and they use that.
Yeah. I think I recall. I think it was Richard Fox who mentioned this. Obviously, Richard's got an extensive real-world military background, and he was saying that if his characters in the Ember War spoke like they would actually speak, it would be virtually unintelligible to
that's true.
To a reader. And it's finding that real fine balance there in terms of communicating across what your average layman reader, or perhaps if they're interested in the genre, they're layman plus a bit, getting across the information they need without overwhelming them. But also, jargon is important to show your authority as a writer, that you've done your homework and you know what's going on. So, yeah, like Scott, if I did a cop thriller and I use sort of the actual jargon we would use, the PIC punch the IP, and we managed to get some DP, and now we're code 5 to custody.
There's some jargon.
You might get it from the outside context, the words like punch and whatnot and custody, but
yeah. I think the jargon sometimes it can be used as a marker, what type of character you're talking about. It'll set the setting, it can set the mood, and lots of different things like that. And then some jargon, I think you should be careful. Some jargon is easy to figure out. And some
technobabble on Star Trek is a good example.
Right.
There's always a scene in Star Trek where they come out with some big long neutrino flows and all that kind of stuff, and the writers probably have a right good laugh doing it. It's like, let's see how many sort of strange words we can get, and then they'll put it in. It might make sense, it might not, but the point is the audience knows at that point, right, they've come out with a solution that makes sense within the context of that world. Sort of a very quick amusing anecdote I quite like, like Doctor Who.
Yep.
One of the old doctors apparently liked the phrase "reverse the polarity on the neutron stream" so much that it was actually the answer to every problem, from microwaving his breakfast to killing
Baker, wasn't it?
Killing a Dalek. Yes, I believe so. Killing a Dalek. So sometimes it can almost be like a little bit of a nod as well.
So when I couldn't get the show to start earlier because I accidentally went live early and then had
you should have reversed the flow on the neutron beam.
I should have reversed the flow of the neutrons, and then the answer would have been 42.
One more quick thing though. I think the moment jargon becomes distracting and pulls the reader out of the narrative, that's when you've gone too far. And as far as the contractions things go, I think the one time that it's really forgivable in like the larger body of a work is if you're writing a first person single POV type book, because that is essentially one character telling you the story in his own voice. So he's going to say things like can't, won't, shouldn't, stuff like that.
That's up in his head.
That's how he talks. Yeah. Right. So I think that's the one time that you don't want to go crazy with them, but you can be a lot more forgiving about the contractions. So in my humble opinion.
No, and your opinion is always my favorite. That's why I got you on the show. I'm always humble. On the jargon thing there. So one of the reasons I left it is because two things. Elmore Leonard had said leave out the boring parts, and I find the explanation's boring usually. And then there's a book called Self-Editing for Fiction Writers by Brown and Remy, I think is how it's pronounced. And they have an acronym that's ROE, resist, or RUE, resist the urge to explain. And most of the time, if you're explaining something, you need to just cut it out.
That's right, because the explanation is taken up.
And I also wanted to respect the readers, that they can figure it out or decide not to read my book if they hate it, I guess.
And on a sort of semi-related note, there's nothing that will garner you a bad review like the misuse of jargon.
Oh yeah,
as well. Especially I don't know if for example you're writing military and you do something that's you misuse it or elsewhere, then you go and do your research basically on it, and especially know that when I've been from England, and obviously our military, which I've done some of their time in, has one set of jargon that might not make sense or have completely different meanings to yours, which would be fine if I wrote in an English soldier or whatever, but if I'm writing from an American POV, you've got to be really, really careful on that front. And at times I've kind of fallen foul by not even realizing there's a difference there, because something might be so obvious that that we're doing it the right way, that you're doing wrong, or vice versa. That we basically watch out. And there's brilliant resources on the internet for sort of what things mean. Urban Dictionary is fantastic in itself. There's some hilarious stuff on there.
Oh, there is. There's the Urban Dictionary. Google, you can get really deep into the woods on some really disgusting parts of humanity in the Urban.
Our team thing at work used to be populating.
You've seen things you can't unsee.
Stuff.
Yes. You want to squeegee your brain after that sometimes.
Let's go a little bit long, because why not?
Okay.
I'm good with it. Unless you guys got some place to be.
No, I was just going to go on Facebook and do this. So if you want to knock them out, let's knock them out.
Let's hang in there for a little bit. So our jargon thing reminded me of, I was at the OWFI conference in Oklahoma Writers Federation Incorporated conference a few years ago, and there was an erotica author, and so somebody asked, well, how do you know when it's too much erotica? And she said, well, when you're writing, I wish I could, I'm going to mess this up now, I'm going to blush, but basically what she said is when you start touching yourself writing it, then it's too much. And so that might be,
that explanation was too much.
Yeah, so that might be the same thing with jargon, But so next question, that with that nice little thought.
Thanks for leaving us with that.
Yeah, rubbing his thighs over jargon.
Right. Hey, hold on a second here. Different podcast completely. So Clifton Slater says, how much research do you do? What is your favorite subject to research not involving erotic? I added that last part because
you needed to. I try to do just a little bit more than I need to get started. And by that, I mean, I feel like a writer should always know just a little bit more than they're presenting to the reader. Because there should always be just, something there to make it feel real. Because you never should feel like you know everything. Case in point, my current work in progress, I got the idea because my best friend told me that under the courthouse here in Huntsville, there's a cave, and I never knew that before. So I dived into finding out about this cave under the courthouse and all this stuff. So, that sparked the idea for the story. And now I know all about that cave and what I need to add to it and subtract from it to make it work for the story I want to write. So, it just kind of depends on how much research you need to do to get to a point where you're comfortable getting started. But I don't think you should get so deep in the research rabbit hole that it keeps you from getting started on the story you want to write. As far as favorite subjects go, I'm actually, I like to research like folklore, mythology, what, different religions and what people are willing to believe and that kind of stuff. So that's my favorite subject to research.
Scott. I like biographies and mostly biographies and stuff like that. History, any type of history, mostly historical stuff is what I research just because I can't stop. It's an addiction.
My cross to bear is I fall foul of exactly what you said, Chuck. I can get really deep down the research rabbit hole, and I can have whole swathes of notes of stuff which are never going to see the light of day, and all of it. In terms of what I like to research, I quite like sort of extreme science, extreme engineering. The capabilities of what can be done and are done often, I find absolutely fascinating. For the Great War Project, as I'm working through there, I've been doing loads of World War II research, which is, again, it's absolutely amazing. What people did, and everyone's got a story to tell in that war. In fact, one of sort of the plot arcs in the first book, which is a very quick summary of it, is that what it is taking World War II and then putting it in space context, to sort of mirroring the key battles, and it's really important for me to do it in a respectful way as well. Very kindly, one of our tribe, Nick Bailey, who's on a few months ago. He actually had one of his grandparents was in World War II and passed away, died in Dunkirk, So the first book is going to be Space Dunkirk, and sort of so nicely Nick's provided me with a load of information about that guy, about that chap, and then I've gone back to Nick and said, actually, can I tell his story? Would it be respectful or disrespectful if I mirrored his story in the book? I mean, yeah, and doing that, which is, it's been really nice to do in a sad way, if that makes sense. But yeah, research is crucial, really. Yeah, to make sure you give things the credit that they're due.
Yeah, I agree. We could go on. I love that sort of stuff, and that's a whole other brand of research I would love to have the time to do, is to go around interviewing people face to face, travel around and get their stories and put some in there. So I also like this question, Fafafabigben. So speaking of advice, what's the worst bit of advice you've received, as in something that didn't work for you at all? Asking for a friend.
The worst piece I got was actually pre-KDP days, back when I was doing the submission rejection tango with all the big houses. Somebody suggested to me that I do one of those pay-to-play deals where I basically coughed up $500 for a agency to look at my manuscript and all this stuff, and it turned out to be a complete ripoff. But that's got to be the worst piece I've ever gotten, I think.
I think there's a lot of, it might not necessarily be bad information, but it's information that doesn't or wouldn't work for yourself, that goes out there. And quite often you see on forums or like really decisive statements like, you must do this to be a success. And especially in your early days of writing and publishing, it might be you kind of grant them a little more credit than possibly they're due. It should always be open-minded. It should always keep an eye out about what might be an emerging trend, or what might simply be something someone stumbled on somehow that does work. But there's a hell of a lot of chaff out there, a hell of a lot of rumours that just aren't based in any kind of reality. And it just make sure you sort of can make sure you do your homework on what people say, and learn to differentiate the difference. Was Craig Martelle, I think he did quite a long piece on this on the 20 books group, with people writing big long one of his rants anyway, which are always great and always amusing.
Informative,
and also informative. So it's important to know. So I'm not really giving a specific piece of a specific example, but there are just go on any of the forums and you'll often see sort of bad advice.
There's a lot of advice on there, and what's good advice for me might be the worst advice ever for you. Like I go back and forth between writing in multiple projects and one project, and I thought I was reformed where I would write just on one project, but now I've learned that I have to write multiple projects. I just can't do it any other way. I'll write my primary project that I have a deadline for like the first half of the day, and I burn up all my brain cells, and then I write whatever else I want and stuff. So that might be good advice for me. It might be terrible advice for somebody else, and vice versa. I guess that's not really advice. But I thought I had a really great answer for this. What's the worst bit of advice you've received? And then I'm kind of blanking on that, on what would be advice I've been specifically given. Most of it is stuff I've sought out for advice, either through books or forums. And a lot of it is the one size fit all thing like you're talking about.
And the one thing to remember is things change as well. What might have been a great piece of advice a year or even 2 years ago, it just is no longer valid for whatever reason it might be. Whether most of us are on Amazon and they might have changed their terms and conditions.
Well, that's the thing about advice is sometimes you don't have the whole story about the advice. The advice could be, you might only be getting a part of what makes it work, and so it might not work for you. The biggest thing is is remember why you're doing this and do what works for you, even if it doesn't fit the template that everybody else does. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. You got to push hard, because I guess, okay, so here it is. Here's the biggest piece of advice, and it's more of implied advice. The implied advice is it takes a year to write a novel and all these things, and you got to write your masterpiece and stuff like that. And I think we're pretty far beyond that. And I don't think you have to write and publish every 30 days or every 6 days or whatever. But the reality is, if you take 10 years to write a book, because I've done that, and then it doesn't work, how many times can you do that before you're out of time? Yep. You can't spend 10 years on a book, because that means you get 3 shots at it your whole life, probably. You need to move a little faster. You got to push harder.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's knock out these last two. Some guy named Hank Garner wants to know.
Who's that guy?
I don't know.
He's got a silky, sexy voice. I
heard he's got a sexy voice.
When you're writing in a new genre, did you do anything to get yourself in a new mindset for that new genre? Yeah, I dive into that genre. Like when I got ready to write my first space opera, I went back and, reread or rewatched or re-listened to all the space operas I remembered enjoying. And I actually take that a little bit further in that, like when I'm putting new characters into these new genres and stuff, I try to do things that character will do. For instance, my new main character in this new thing I'm working on, I've decided he is a fan of New Orleans jazz. So I've been listening to New Orleans jazz while I'm working and stuff on that. So really, I personally just try to immerse myself in it for the duration of the project to keep me in that mind space. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think that's, I completely agree with that. I mean, I've been fortunate in terms of the genres that I've written in are perhaps quite close in terms of both the writing styles needed and sort of the mindset that's needed. So hard science fiction to military science fiction thriller. Actually, in hard science fiction, there tends to be a mystery. In a thriller, there tends to be some form of mystery that goes on. In hard science fiction, you've got quite hard technical stuff. In a military science fiction and thrillers, you have hard technical stuff. Actually, they're really closely linked genres that require minimal sort of shift, other than perhaps you've got to be a bit more kind of action orientated in a military thriller. But I'd say it's. I don't really have much to add to it. It's not really a challenge I've overly faced or had to face as dramatically as other people have. What about you, Scott?
Read a lot of books, watch a lot of movies, tell a lot of stories, listen to a lot of stories with your friends, and just get into it. That's the big thing. You can really accelerate your genre learning curve if you watch the right visual medium along with your reading, right. I think, because most people are going to be at least somewhat familiar with film, and you won't go too far wrong. Now, you can't just do that, but you can, double your money by, say watching The Expanse or Battlestar Galactica from start to finish, or whatever your favorite one is.
Yeah.
I've just had a text come through with a question on it. So,
okay.
So it's Dave Pengali. How desperate are you all for a book series to go to film, and which one of yours would you want it to be?
Ooh, I'm not necessarily desperate, but if someone came to me and said, "Hey, which one of these things would you like to make into that?" I would want it to be Netflix. And I would want them to take my Paragons trilogy and make it into a 3-season deal, 1 season being each book.
That was my answer too. I want your Paragon series.
Well, thank you.
I don't know what I would use on my own. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I would pick of my own, because, like I said, and this is like weird confession time for Scott. We wait till hour and a half into
15 over, yeah.
Is that I have moments where I get super self-conscious about what I write, and like I said it earlier in the thing, is like somebody's going to read that and they're going to think I'm a terrible person. So putting some of that stuff out there, because your characters have to do things that you're not going to do. And so some of the stuff that I've written would make for some pretty unpleasant characters on film, but people would probably love it, but I don't know. So.
I had my first character come up who's actually a proper bad guy. Normally I have characters who are antagonistic to the protagonist, but they might have quite a good reason for it. And my first bad guy, and there's a few POVs in his point of view, in his section, from him in his sections, and you're thinking, I'm writing this as an utter you know, he's got like repulsive views and whatnot. But yeah, back to Dave's question. I'd go for a TV series over a film. Perhaps Erebus as a film. I think that's you know, a nice. Yeah, that's probably a really good, if I do say so myself, pace for a film. But I definitely think The Locust would be something I'd like to see on a TV series. Seeing the sort of thing they're coming out with on Netflix. I think
Locust is Netflix ready. I mean, whoever grabs hold of that, they could probably go straight to Netflix with it, because it's got that kind of awesome thriller pacing. So if anybody on Netflix is listening, let's make Paragon and Locust into the series, please. Thank you.
Okay, last question. Bill Frisbee says, are there any books you have written but not published, and why? Yes, I have 3 novels that I've written that I never tried to publish, simply because they are big steaming piles of word vomit that need to just languish in obscurity forever. They were my learning novels, and that's where they need to stay, where I can look back at them and go, oh yeah, that's why I don't do that anymore. So
some words are a victim to your training needs, aren't they?
Exactly.
For me, I've got one novel that's sort of, I'd say sort of kind of 75% done. The third part of the Sleeping Gods one, and I kind of ground to halt one because due to sort of a publishing contract, I had to sort of move forward on the Locust series and kind of not be distracted. But 2 is I was kind of really struggling to give it a finale that I felt gave credit to that series. I mean, fortunately, it's more kind of standalone books within a world. But that third book was kind of going to cap it all off, and I'm like, I just need to be comfortable that I'm giving that series a stand up, because it was my first series, first love, and I don't want it to. I don't want it to do that series a disservice. So it's one of those. I'm taking the opportunity that has been kind of inflicted. That sounds so rude. That has been put on me to have to focus on the Locust, to kind of let that process through and think, what can be how can I finish that in a way that I like. But so it's sort of semi-trunked at the moment. But that's that one.
With for me, I have a bunch. I have lots of those books that I'll pick it up and I'll go I'll start reading. I'm like, that's pretty good. And I'm like, no, that's not good. That was a trick. That was good for about 2 sentences.
I was drunk.
Yeah. What was I 14 when I was 14 when I wrote that? No wonder it's so crappy. Not that 14-year-olds can't write amazing books. I just wasn't happening to be one of them. But the one but the one that pops in my head is one called Route Ships, and only a few people I know are familiar with the premise of that. And it's almost completely written. It's basically done. It needs a couple of scenes to finish it off, but I love that story like it's literally my own child. I think it's awesome, and I haven't published it just because I've learned my lesson with things that seem like great ideas but are hard to market, and I don't really know what to do with that yet. And I got other projects to do, but someday that will get written and get published. But it's a really amazing story that I really am in love with, but I just can't do it right now.
So you love it like a child, but you're locking it in your cellar.
It's basically Master and Commander in space, but like I contrived. The deal is that I'm not real good with science, like a lot of smart people on here. And so I always contrive a way to have faster light travel with like no science. And in this particular story, there's a way people can travel, but not really know how they're doing it. And so you have these societies that wind up basically space traveling, but they are not space capable on their tech level. So anyway, I like it a lot.
I like that idea.
It could be fun someday, maybe in like 50 years. We'll get that one done out there.
Your children will come down into your cellar and your basement and find it locked in the unpublished works of Scott Moon.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. So any final thoughts, any final questions? And let's wrap this up. We've gone long because we're undisciplined hacks. That
is absolutely true.
We didn't have Josh keeping us tightly under control.
That's right. We didn't have the whip cracker. The only thing I want to say is I thought we had some really great questions, and I wouldn't mind doing these more often and getting questions from our peeps and seeing what they need to hear and want to hear and stuff. So yeah, I had fun with this.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. It's,
awesome. Well, thanks everyone for hanging out with us today. Let us know what you thought about the show in the comments below, and be sure to give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. We'd of course love to hear from you. For me, Chuck, and Ralph, we've been live with Keystroke Medium, and come back and join us next time. We'll talk about reading and writing and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. See y'all later.
Bye, folks.